raised right here in Chilliwack, and I've been married to my wife Lisa for 20 years, and we have a son who turned 15 today. We love living, working, and raising our family in this remarkable community. I'm an honorary member of the Rotary Club of Chilliwack and a member of the Royal Canadian Legion Better Branch 280, the Hope District Chamber of Commerce, Chilliwack Chamber of Commerce, the Chilliwack Healthier Community Group, and the Chilliwack Housing First Task Team. It's been an honor to serve the people of Chilliwack Hope. I'm asking you to continue to put your trust in me as I fight for you in our communities as a strong representative both here at home and back in Ottawa. As a member of the official opposition Conservatives, I've helped to hold Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government to account. Now Canadians can hold them accountable as well. More and more Canadians feel like they're either falling behind or barely getting by under this Liberal government. That's simply not good enough. Only Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party have the team and the plan that can help put Canada back on track. We proposed a universal tax cut, which would put $850 back into the pockets of Canadian couples. We promised to remove the GST on your home heating bills, because heating your home in the winter isn't a luxury and shouldn't be taxed the same. We've committed to increasing the age credit by $1,000, which could save a senior couple $300 a year. We want to reduce foreign aid by 25%, cutting $1.5 billion to middle and upper class countries, because that money should be spent where it's needed most, which is right here at home. And we've also committed to reversing Justin Trudeau's tax changes on small businesses, because we should be supporting, not undermining, the backbone of our local and national economies. Andrew Scheer has also proposed a real plan for the environment, a plan that is focused on technology, not tax hikes, on protecting our natural environment by banning the dumping of raw sewage into our oceans, rivers, and lakes, and on using Canadian products and Canadian innovation to take the fight against climate change global. After 4 years, Justin Trudeau has shown that he cannot be trusted. He broke his promises on balancing the budget, on reforming the electoral system, and on running an ethical and transparent government, to name just a few. He's been found guilty of breaking ethics laws on multiple occasions, the latest being with his S&C Lavalin scandal. He's embarrassed Canada with his actions at home and his weak leadership on the world stage. On October 21st, Canadians can elect a new government led by Andrew Scheer, a Conservative government that will live within its means, lower your taxes, and put more money in your pocket, because it's time for you to get ahead.
Thank you very much. Maybe we could go off next with Rob.
Yeah, I'm Rob and I've been a teacher in Chilliwack for 20 years. I've lived in Chilliwack my entire life, and as a teacher, I have been teaching social studies and social justice. My training is geography and history. I got involved in the political realm probably because what I was looking at happening on a basically national level was an erosion of our fundamental freedoms and a failure among all the other political parties to stand up against the political correctness that was leading the charge. And political correctness is this barrier, this box that is thrown around what is considered appropriate discussion at a national level or a local level, so that when individuals find themselves being attacked by those advocating political correctness, they're basically saying that opinion is no longer allowed to be spoken. That opinion is now verboten. And the people who define that box is this radical 20% of the Canadian population. And I'm not comfortable with how much power they've been able to wield over the political system. When Max Bernier stepped away from the Conservative Party, he was making a declaration that we, the PPC, are not going to bow down to political correctness. We're going to step out of that box and we're going to have the tough conversations. And I believe that when he did that, he was representing the truer conservative values that have helped to shape and guide our nation. I'm going to read a quote by John G. Diefenbaker. And he was a great conservative prime minister, and he said this: "I am a Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, or free to choose those who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind." And to me, that's what motivates me, is a belief that we have to take a tough stance to make sure that people are free to speak with the sources of that fear come from many different directions in our society today. I will agree with Mark when he says that after 4 years, Justin Trudeau showed that he can be trusted. But for those who are actually paying close attention, he showed that before he ever became Prime Minister. He made sure that people knew he could not be trusted when he betrayed promises made to his own candidates and his members of his own party on whether or not they would be able to voice their conscience on an issue like abortion. He said no. He said unless you support radical pro-choice, meaning abortion at any time and for any reason, you would not be allowed to represent his party. And that's not what he ran on when he was seeking the leadership. He imposed that once he had the leadership. And to me, that's when I knew that he could not be trusted. I see Matt taking the tough stand, and I wanted to join with him. And so, as this political process unfolded, I put my name forward, and here I am.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. And now Art for the group.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real honor to be able to speak with you. My name is Arthur Green, and I'm the Green Party of Canada candidate for Chilliwack Hope. I've committed myself to run in federal politics because of the ill-conceived economic policy in regards to massive mineral and energy extraction, in the degradation of the environment by the current federal governments. Myself, always having been a firm believer that good environmental policy is also good economic policy. I find the current system of stewardship deplorable. I believe that an economic policy that's determined by the consumption of fossil fuels is nothing less than mad, and that this profit-driven insanity shouts, Houston, we have a problem. I believe the economic engine of this country should be driven by a policy to the commitment of clean and renewable energy sources. I believe that this is the way that we have to move if we're going to avoid a climate crisis that may well threaten all living species on Earth. I'm not here because I want to. I'm here because I'm compelled to. I'm compelled to save our planet and future generations from greed and corruption of political parties that are hell-bent on maintaining their wealth and power at any cost, even the life of the planet itself. I decided to run for the Green Party because I'm concerned for the future of your children. I'm concerned for the future of your grandchildren. And I'm concerned for all future generations. I'm concerned for our resident orca population and all our sea life. And I'm concerned for our polar bears and our shrinking Arctic. And I'm concerned about rising sea levels, acidification of our oceans, and the destruction of the coral reefs. It's become absolutely clear all other political parties in this country are refusing to tell you the truth, and leading by a horrendous example that power and wealth is equal to faith, hope, and joy. I beg to differ, and I'll fight for you. And I'll fight for our planet until death do us part, whether I'm elected or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Art. So now we're going to move to questions from the floor. And like I said, if you could pick up the mic if you have a chance. Dave, first one.
Question for all of the candidates.
Dave, you just state your name to start with. I know your name, but...
Dave Bradley. Question for all of the candidates. I believe the strength of the democratic system is in having ordinary people representing ordinary people. Therefore, I do not believe in career politics. A comment from each of you, please, on that.
Yeah, I've heard this comment before, obviously, and it's always amusing to me that, especially when people at the head table say that they're not a career politician, when every single one of us is running right now to make politics our full-time career. Politics is a full-time job, and it requires dedication of the person who is elected to do it at a full-time basis. It's not the same as being a city councillor, for instance, where you might be able to have a job in the community as well. So every one of us is running to become a career politician. I think that absolutely we need the common person to represent us in the House of Commons. I've always said that. We need the common sense of the common people in the House of Commons, and I think it doesn't matter what your background is, where you come from, if you put your name forward. All of us rely on the constituents who take the time to vote. They make the choice. We don't make the choice. All we can do is put ourselves forward, and the people of Chilliwack, I hope, will make the decision as to who should represent them. I've been honored to hold that position since 2011, and I will continue to work hard for you and fight for you and this community if I'm re-elected on October 21st.
Yeah, and I do agree that we are all running to basically be in politics full time. I'm not sure it's a case where we can all say that we're going to be career politicians, and that right now, as I'm running, I'm still full-time teaching. And so I have to get a half-time TOC just to be here. Some other individuals might have more options on that, but to me, I am a teacher first, running for a federal office. And I'm not running because I'm trying to be a career politician. I'm running very much like Arthur Green because I have concerns about the future and where we are heading. If I wind up being in Parliament, I will dedicate my full-time job to serving this community and fighting for the future that I want. But the truth is, everyone who puts their name forward in this process is in the same fight. We are trying to convince the good people of Chilliwack Hope to give us their support, to give us their approval so that we can represent them at the national level. So I understand that it is a full-time job, and everybody comes into it in a different way. We all come from different backgrounds. I certainly don't think that we should be holding against anyone, whether it's Mark, myself, Art, or any of the others, what career they have done before they threw their hat into the ring. Please look at why they throw their hat into the ring. Most of us do it out of the best intentions.
Thank you, Rob. If you'd like to respond to that too.
Yes, thank you for the question. Actually, if you had asked me 10 years ago whether I'd ever get into politics, I would have probably told you there's a better chance we'd shake barehanded on the moon. But aside from that, I do have a lot of lifetime experience. I've worked in the motion picture industry for 35 years, and I've been involved with some of the largest mass media corporations in North America, and some pretty incredible budgets that I've looked after as well. I've worked in all the resource industries. I've worked in forestry, and I've worked in the mining industry, and I've also worked in the oil and gas industry. I was actually a roughneck in Drayton Valley, Alberta for a while. So yes, I understand where that question is coming from. It's nice to have politicians that represent you that do have great lifetime experiences, because they can actually compare their experiences to actually governing and running populations and jurisdictions with experience and with flavor and color. So thank you very much.
Green? Any other questions? Gentleman in green?
Hi, my name's Ron Jackson. I live in the Hope area. I've got two questions, a little bit of preamble. First one is a yes or no to increasing our oil production or reducing our oil production, and what kind of examples does that set to the world as we're about to increase our oil production with climate change, everybody getting it, right? So a yes or no to increasing or not? Yes or no? And the second one is weapons of destruction, weapons of killing people. $1.5 billion Saudi Arabia, we're building half-tracks with guns on them to go around, so they can go around the world and shoot people. Yes or no to weapons of destruction? Should we continue building or stop building weapons to kill people?
Thank you. Maybe we start with Art on that one.
No to both questions.
Yeah, when it comes to increasing oil, yes or no, I'm going to have to say yes. And one of the reasons is right now what's driving climate change probably more than any other factor is coal use. Coal is right now a huge enemy. And I say that knowing that we are a major exporter of coal to China as well. So it's not as though we're not making money selling, the black rock or the black liquid. We're making money selling both. Same with liquefied natural gas. If we can help sell oil and natural gas to China and get them to, phase out coal, that actually does a lot more good than just saying no to all of our fossil fuels. We should also be, pushing forward plans to expand nuclear power, which is a huge generator of energy with no CO2 production. If we're saying that climate change is an existential threat to the world, then we should be using nuclear power since it produces zero carbon dioxide emissions. Regarding weapons of destruction, this is also a reason why I'm actually in somewhat favor of nuclear power, is because we're literally taking swords and turning them into plowshares. We're literally taking nuclear warhead material and burning it in the nuclear power plants. And I'm not a big fan of the weapons industry. I think, however, we have the industry. Canada needs to be able to produce weapons for our own purposes. Nations make a lot of money selling it. I'm not happy that it's going to Saudi Arabia. I'm not happy about the fact that we're in some ways arming them for a conflict with Yemen that most Canadians don't understand. But there are some economic realities here. I would have a hard time standing before a factory that makes those weapons and saying, I want to get rid of your thousands of jobs and hurt and shut down your entire community. Ultimately, someone would be selling those weapons. This is the nature of our global economy. And we have to have the ability to still arm our own military. We shouldn't be relying on everybody else to supply to us. I'd rather us, in that case, be sellers than buyers.
Not exactly a yes or no, but anyway.
No, I think that's fair, that it isn't exactly yes or no. But I think that the reality is that the way that Canadians produce oil and gas is the best in the world. We have the best environmental standards. We have the most efficient technologies to get oil and gas out of the ground in the safest, most environmentally responsible way possible. So it is better for the globe, I believe, that Canada produces our oil and our natural gas in an ethical fashion. When I would much rather see the oil sands of Alberta continue to be responsibly developed than import oil from Saudi Arabia, Algeria, Venezuela, places that do not stand up for human rights, do not believe in the same environmental standards that we do, all at the same time producing hundreds of thousands of family-supporting jobs and billions of dollars in economic benefit to the country, which funds the things like our healthcare and education systems that we've come to rely on. So I am a big supporter of Canadian energy. I believe we do it better than anyone in the world, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it. On military procurement, I think, again, the characterization of that leads to a false choice. We have people that in this community that work for Cascade Aerospace. Cascade Aerospace produces, is part of the Hercules aircraft production. Those kind of things are used both in military theater and for humanitarian efforts. And to simply say we won't be part of the global industrial complex on the production of military equipment, I think is naive. I think it is an important economic driver. If we do it the right way, I think it benefits Canada and benefits the world.
Given that Art was the only one who complied with the question, I better give him an opportunity if he wants to respond to that other about solar power perhaps, or something else like that.
I'd just like to talk about expanding our oil industry. The expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline, or the Canadian pipeline as I suppose it's called now, is for the sole purpose of exporting diluted bitumen. It has nothing to do with producing energy for Canada. If Canada was serious about upscaling its energy production, we'd be refining and producing more of our own gas and oil here in Canada. But that's not the case. The real answer to the statement is that diluted bitumen, we don't even have a market for that yet. And the pipeline that they're going to build for the expansion is for the sole purpose of exporting diluted bitumen to what we don't even have a market for yet. Not only are they going to triple the volume of diluted bitumen across the oceans, but this stuff is absolutely an environmental nightmare. If there's any sort of spill or anything, it sinks to the bottom. We can't clean it up. And you know, if we wanted to produce more asphalt or something, that's what it's good for. But you know, the product that they get from diluted bitumen is not a good thing. And you know, it's like a lost leader. The only way that we're making any economic gain on it is through the jobs. The price for diluted bitumen is so low that it's not worth doing it. So I mean, and as far as the arms sales go, I mean, there's a lot of great ways we could make money. I mean, we could sell heroin to school kids as well. Is that a good way to make money? I mean, you know, you put all those dealers out of work just because, you know. So I don't really get Rob's argument for, you know, having to shut down the arms factories because it's going to put people out of work. Even though, you know, we end up killing all these people, then we create refugees, and then when they want to come to Canada, Rob says, well, no, we can't have you. We got to protect our people and their jobs. So it's okay to blow the hell out of them and then create the refugees, but you know, then you have to stay home. So that's my answer.
All right, thanks, Bob. Any other questions? Gentleman in the blue.
A few years ago,
Sorry, could you just wait for the mic and then start with your name?
my name is Matt King. A few years ago, there was something in the news called Motion 103 or M103, and then I think prior to that there was Bill C-16, and they're basically around freedom of speech in Canada. I think one was saying that Islamophobia is going to be, or now is illegal, but there was no straight definition for what Islamophobia is, and the C-16 bill was stating that there would be a legislation enforcing language. Can I hear from each party of how you expect that those two bills would shape our future?
Start with Mark.
So on both of those, both Motion 103 and C-16, I was in Parliament and voted against both of them. The first one was a bill on condemning Islamophobia, etc. And while there are clear laws around hate speech in Canada, and those are clearly defined in law, this was a very murky subject that threatened, I believe, to certainly put a chill on discussions around religion, or one religion in this case, and did so in a very unfocused way. It just was kind of a catch-all designed, I believe. It was during the time of the Conservative leadership race to try to be a trap that would be sprung on Conservatives to say, if you oppose that, you're a racist. And that has happened time and time again with this government. These motions come forward which are not designed to improve the lives of Canadians, but are designed for political advantage to bring about a chill, quite frankly, on freedom of speech. When the bill passed with the support of the Liberals and the NDP, when they went to committee to study it, they asked, our members asked every witness to please give me your definition of Islamophobia. And at the end of it, there were 35 different definitions, all the way from whatever someone believes is the definition to very strictly sticking to the criminal code definition of what hate speech is. So I think that one, again, was singled out one religion for protection in this way and was completely ill-defined. And quite frankly, I think it would set a dangerous precedent if we went down that road. C-16, again, I would agree with your assessment that it was designed to bring about, to stop people from raising certain issues. That's why I voted against it again. And we saw almost immediately following the passage of that bill, again, it was only opposed by some Conservatives, myself included. We saw the case of Lindsay Shepherd at a university, of course, being called before a university tribunal and being said, because C-16 is passed, you may no longer talk about certain issues, which of course the government at the time said that's not what it's about. It's about ensuring that people with transgender people are protected under the Canadian Human Rights Code. So I think we have to be careful. These things are put forward if you're being charitable with the best of intentions, but I think, quite frankly, often with unintended consequences. And we need to stand up and protect freedom of religion, freedom of speech in this country. And both of those, I believe, we're going in the wrong direction on that, and that's why I voted against them.
Thank you, Ron. Rob, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, our party wants to, we openly oppose both M103 and Bill C-16, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It is an erosion of our fundamental freedoms, our freedom of expression, conscience, religion, and charter rights have to be made paramount. Human rights are usually put forth and understood to be more like aspirations, and they are often very worthy aspirations that we have to fight for, but they have to take a back seat to the rights, the civil rights, the charter rights, which are enshrined in our Constitution. Bill C-16 opened the door in combination with provincial human rights courts for compelled speech laws. And compelled speech laws mean that you could be forced to use another person's pronouns against your will. And those pronouns, by the way, are being manufactured as we speak. There's practically a list of about a couple of hundred of them now. And you probably haven't even heard of this. There's them, cost, close, and I deal with this, you know, in my social justice class, and students look at this and like, how are you supposed to keep straight all of these pronouns? And one person said, oh, program it into your phone so that it'll tell you what for every person. I'm like, and if you don't want to be looking at your phone every time you have a conversation with a person, what does that mean? And this was missed by a lot of individuals, despite the fact that Jordan Peterson gave very clear testimony on this before the Senate. It's almost as though they simply chose to ignore what he was saying. M103, same problem. I agree with Mark. You have to define your terms. And they put forth Islamophobia, and the question was, well, what do you mean? Does that mean that you're not allowed to attack Muslims? Because I would agree. Does that mean you're not allowed to challenge Islam and its ideas? Because then I would disagree. Right? One is an attack on the person, the other one's an attack on an idea. And in this country, freedom of religion especially protects your right to challenge the religious ideas. If we don't believe you have that right, we don't believe in freedom of expression or religion in this country. So we do need to define our terms. This is a continuous erosion of our rights, and we saw it as well with the summer jobs attestation. We saw that in numerous actions played by this government. I believe in freedom of expression. That includes the free press, the free media. And I don't know how we can say that media is free when we're spending $1.6 billion on the CBC and $600 million more for independent media if it's still independent. I'm not sure. There's something going on here, and we're seeing that the whole system is being hijacked and put down to the future, look forward down the line. It's really scary. Lindsay Shepherd showed this when she was dragged into a star chamber. Her star chamber was, in the wake of Bill C-16. I was dragged into a star chamber in 2006 where my principal and vice principal were upset with something I had written, and I tried to tell them that what people were saying I said, I clearly didn't say. They were misinterpreting what I said. His answer to me, the principal said to me, Rob, it doesn't matter what you say, it only matters how what you say is interpreted by someone else. And I wish I'd been a little smarter in that moment. I was too stunned, but I wish I'd been a little smarter, because I would have looked at him and said, how dare you say I'm fat? And he's like, I didn't call you fat. It doesn't matter what you called me. It only matters how I interpret it. That's the problem with where we're at. We are now giving the interpretation the power instead of the words actually spoken. So we need to make sure that we put those charter rights fundamental. And that's why I believe we need to really think about repealing or reforming the Canadian Human Rights Code.
Well, Islamophobia is exactly that, a phobia. There's no reason to fear any religion. We keep hearing all these interpretations of Sharia law and all this stuff, but it never happens in Canada. I'm sure it happens in other places. Well, why are we so brazenly afraid of what other people, who they worship, or what they say? We should all have the rights to say and speak and praise whoever we wish, as long as we're not, directly hurting anybody else. Other people's interpretations are exactly that, their interpretations. So, we have to be a bit more tolerant for all people and religions and races, and we shouldn't be discrediting people that that are different than us, so.
Dave?
Dave Bradley again. You three gentlemen are here asking for our vote so that you can represent us in Ottawa. But in fact, if we vote for you, we're voting for your party, because there will be very few opportunities for you to have a free vote in Parliament. You will vote the way you're directed by the party. What changes can be made in the system to allow for more free votes and therefore greater representation of the people that you're charged with representing?
Can we start with that?
Okay, first of all, the Green Party is the only party in Canada that's unwhipped. I was given direct instructions by my party leader, and she told me, Arthur, I'm not your boss. Your constituents are your boss. So if your constituents believe in something that's different than what our party line is, you stand up for them, because they're the ones that vote for you. What was the second part of the question?
What changes might be made?
Oh, and I think the big problem that we have in Canada is the fact that we have this election system called first past the post, and we should be fighting for proportional representation so that every vote in Canada counts and every vote is represented. And that means there wouldn't be one wasted vote in this room. Every vote would be represented in the House of Commons. So that's the simple answer for that question.
Yeah, when I got involved with the People's Party, it was at a decades meeting, and we actually, as we formed our EDA, Max Bernier, we got him on a conference call, and we had a chance to ask him a question. And my question to Max Bernier was about this: would we be a party with a vote? Now, certainly on certain things, like if you bring forth a party budget, you're going to have a whip vote on that. The discussion, the debate takes place in the caucus, but you have to be unified on those. But what he told me was that on all sorts of issues of conscience, including abortion, we would have a free vote. And that's a reality of our party, is that we aren't going to be whipping the vote on those kinds of issues. So a good example of this would be the issue of abortion, where we've had 50 plus of our PPC candidates all sign on to a pledge saying that we would restrict abortion after the 24th week. Our leader has been very forthright on this issue, and he supported Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson and others of us who have signed on saying we would bring that forth as a private member's bill, and at the very least have the discussion. I think we have to be aware that there's the issue of the free vote, but there's also the issue of the free voice. If we are not allowing a free vote on some issues, I agree, that's a problem. But it's even a bigger problem if individuals aren't allowed to speak freely on the issues that are affecting this country. We need to be able to allow politicians to tell us their thoughts on issues, even if those issues are not even directly connected to the federal politics. And Max has been demonstrating that. He's spoken on a number of issues that he believes are relevant to Canadians, such as Jessica Yanis bringing women before the Human Rights Tribunal. He's spoken on that. We've been forthright on sharing our opinions on abortion and climate change and a whole lot of other issues. And we're not necessarily all in unity, but we are unified in the belief that our voices matter and that Canadian voices matter and that we have to allow Canadians to be heard. And let's have the tough discussions, but let's not use the parliamentary process to keep silent the voices that disagree.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And as some of you know, I was appointed the party whip in the last Parliament. So, but I think that was actually an exciting opportunity for me. I believe, quite frankly, that on matters that were not confidence matters, that our members should have free votes. And I think you saw with the Conservative Party had the most free votes of any party in the last Parliament. And that's because we do believe that our primary job is to represent, yes, our conscience, also our constituents. The party is obviously why we are able to get elected. That is the reality, and Art's right about that, that in this system, the way that you get elected is through your party, through your leader, and through your own personal connections to the community. But we shouldn't pretend that that the party doesn't play a key role in it, and that we all run on a platform that we commit to uphold if we are elected. So there's part of that where if you have a platform commitment, your party commitments, those things are part of why you got elected, and I think you do have to honor the promises that you made during an election. And I think that is part of what is seen as the whip process. Say, yes, I will vote with Conservatives all the time to get tougher on crime, to lower taxes. That's what I'm telling you today that I will do if I'm elected. So keeping your promises and voting all the same way shouldn't be seen as a big threat. But we should, I do think that there is value in having even Preston Manning used to talk about there should be 2 votes on a confidence measure. If there's a piece of legislation that comes forward right now for the governing side, it would be catastrophic for even a single piece of their legislation to be defeated. No matter how minor it is, no matter how inconsequential it is, it would be seen as a fundamental threat to the leadership of whoever the Prime Minister is. So Preston's suggestion was it should be immediate. You could vote down a piece of legislation and have an immediate vote afterwards saying, did you also mean that you no longer have confidence in the government? And I think you would see a lot better legislation if members of Parliament were free to criticize, even behind closed doors, yes, but even vote the way that they believe they should, if it wasn't going to lead to the fall of the government. No one's going to defeat a minor transport regulation bill, even if it's no good, if it means that we're all going to come back and have an election as a result. So you have to be careful not to just say 3 votes for everyone all the time, because with our convention as it currently is, if the government loses a vote in the House of Commons, certainly on things like a budget, we're into a new election. So these are not without consequence. So we have to find ways to allow members to, while respecting what, that they continue to uphold the promises they made to their constituents when they ran for office, have a way to criticize government legislation, even if they're in the government. That's where it's the most important, quite frankly. So we have to have those discussions, and I think that does start with the recognition that we can oppose specific pieces of legislation without opposing the government, and we need to find a way to make that more of an option for members.
Any other questions? Ron?
My question's in relation.
Just one second. And who are you?
In case you guys don't know, my name's Ron. Ron Stern, I'm a member of the Chilliwack-Fraser Rotary Club. My question is in reference to equalization payments. In light of the fact that $394 billion has been paid out in the last 40-odd years, of which Quebec has received $280 billion of it, and doesn't have to declare the revenues of Hydro-Quebec, but BC, on the other hand, has to declare revenues from BC Hydro, so the formula is broken. If you were elected, would you A, address the equalization payment format, and B, how?
Let's start with Mark on that one.
Yeah, thanks. Equalization, it's a very tough one, and it's been made more difficult by the way that what has been the economic engine of the country, Alberta, Saskatchewan, how they've been hurting over the last number of years, and how I think there needs to be a couple of changes to equalization. One, I think it needs to be more nimble. It can't wait for multiple years. These things are negotiated typically, I believe it's on every 10 years, there's a negotiation on how it's calculated, what goes into it, what counts as revenues and what does not. So we need to have a way, where there is a massive downturn in one section of the country that has to continue to pay into equalization. I think we need to find a way to recognize the economic realities of the entire country. As opposed to, it is, quite frankly, difficult to negotiate on because it does require the consent of the provinces. You are negotiating an agreement within confederation, so it's not like the provincial government can stand up and say, this is how it's going to be. This is an agreement that's negotiated. So I think you have to have the commitment to look for fairness, for ways to make it more equitable. But I think it's anyone saying I'll fix this if I get elected is you look at this election, and this Prime Minister spent the entire time attacking provincial premiers, and so I think negotiating with any part of, whether it's on pharmacare, healthcare, equalization, is going to be very, very difficult for Justin Trudeau if he's re-elected. So you have to have a good working relationship with the premiers as well, which is something that's been abandoned under this government. So improve relations with the premiers, make it more flexible, but realize that it is not an easy thing to change. It's not quite as hard to change as the Constitution, but it's up there.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, Max Bernier, I have a lot of people, they will say things like, oh, we don't need another French-Canadian Prime Minister, but the thing is, Max is known and nicknamed the Albertan from Quebec. And this is because he will stand up in Quebec or New Brunswick or any part of Canada and say he opposes the equalization formula as it stands. And Mark is right, it's not an easy thing to fix because it was actually, enshrined very strongly into the law by Pierre-Éliott Trudeau, and we've been sort of stuck with it. But the way it was it used to be Quebec got about 50% of the equalization. And then Stephen Harper rewrote the formula, and now they get 70%. 70%, right? And so they're getting the lion's share by far, and that is a huge problem. And it is true that they get to exempt things like hydro. There's not a transparent formula. And so there's a lot of challenges with the equalization. Max Bernier, he's arguing that not only is it unfair to the western provinces that we have to send all our money to Quebec and a few other jurisdictions, but it also prevents those jurisdictions from doing what they need to do to unlock the resource base of their provinces. Newfoundland got out of being a have-not province by developing their oil. New Brunswick really wanted energy east to happen, but Quebec said no, because why wouldn't they say no? They're getting all our money without the cost, and so they get to be anti-oil and stand on their laurels saying they're anti-oil, but they don't feel the cost in their healthcare or their education system. And the truth is, they're able to do things in their healthcare and their education system that we can't, which is a real problem because it was supposed to be equalization, allowing everyone to have about the same level of services. They have services way in advance of what we can have in Western Canada, and we're paying for it. Universities in Quebec are the cheapest universities in Canada, but only the cheapest for students from Quebec. When we send a student from the rest of Canada there, they slap on an additional $3,500 onto their tuition cost, making it one of the most expensive universities in Canada. This is how Quebec has been playing the game. Now, the truth is, I guarantee you a lot of people in Quebec don't want to constantly have their hand out and take more money. They want product. They want to be able to stand on their own feet. And you need to be able to offer them a new vision of Canada where the Quebec population, the New Brunswick population are able to be proud of the development of their resources and not owe anything to any other province. They will be able to hold and celebrate their own successes. And that's the vision that Max is bringing to New Brunswick. That's the vision he's bringing to Quebec. And I think it will resonate with people in Quebec when they hear it.
Tom?
Well, first of all, equalization should be determined by need and not jurisdiction. And, we come right back to the first past the post election system. So whatever jurisdiction holds the most seats for the sitting government, they get the most money. So, it is actually an easy fix if we just change our electoral system so that every vote in Canada is represented and every vote is represented. Then I don't think that we have to worry about money being ponying over to the provinces that hold the most members of the elected government, and then we could just send out payments to those that actually need the money instead of those that are loyal to the sitting government.
Thank you, Rod.
Well, and it's a great question. Truth be told, families come in all shapes and all sizes. Now, generally speaking, what I regard as a traditional family is parents, in whatever shape they come in. Parents basically look after their own children, whether they're adopted or otherwise. It's the point, though, that it's the parents that have the authority primary, that they are considered to be the primary caregiver of their own children. They have the primary point of responsibility. What's happening right now is we have all sorts of systems under the Human Rights Code that are trying to strip parents of their rights. They're basically saying that parents don't have the right over all sorts of issues, medical practices and procedures, whether or not they're allowed to opt their children out of certain lessons in public schools. We are supposed to be able to, under the Declaration of Human Rights, which John Humphreys, a Canadian, helped to write, we're supposed to be able to determine what kind of education our children will receive. It's written right there in the Declaration. But right now, we have a system where the people making the decisions on their education are not listening to parents. SOGI 123 did not include any parent groups that were involved in it. It didn't include any pediatrician societies that were involved in it. It didn't include any church groups. The only groups that were really involved and present in it were the UBC Faculty of Education, the BCTF, a bunch of LGBT rights organizations, and minimal involvement from the government. That's a lot of people who think alike, right? And where was the voice against it? And the impact that it had would include, one of the provisions, was that if a child was essentially identifying as a different gender at school, the parents wouldn't be even informed, no matter what age it happens. They would be protecting the parents, and basically stopping parents from even being told that this is happening. Given the fact that it has a high level of suicide ideation attached to it, I think parents should be informed if there's a health risk to the child, right? They should be at least able to say, this is what's going on, you should know. And yet, we are seeing that those rights are being taken away. So when I talk about traditional families, I am actually talking about where we regard the parents as the primary responsibility and the primary ones providing care to the child, adopted or otherwise. They are the primary caregivers, and the government's rights only kick in when it's been demonstrated, absolutely demonstrated, that those parents are failing in that task.
Thanks, Rob. Any other questions? Gentleman here.
Gentlemen, my name is Michael Regan, and I have a question on immigration. Together with a number of people in this room, I'm believe it or not, an immigrant in Canada, and I'm very proud of Canada's immigration policy. I understand that we have a target next year for about 350,000 to 400,000 immigrants into this country. But my concern is there's a hypocrisy around this immigration, and it seems there are two tiers of immigrant. There's the white European immigrant, and there's the Somalian, the Eritrean, the Syrian refugee immigrant. I'd just like to hear your policies, with your comments on immigration into this country.
I think that Canadians expect to have an immigration system that is compassionate, orderly, and fair. And I think that is something that, quite frankly, this government has failed to deliver to Canadians. We've seen it with especially the situation in Roxham Road in Quebec, where we've had tens of thousands of people fleeing the United States and coming over the border illegally because they know that if they cross at an irregular crossing, which is not at, say, here would be an example, if you ran across at Zero Avenue or you tried to cross at the Sumas border crossing, there's two completely different sets of rules that apply to you. If you come across in the legal way, you are immediately informed, thank you, you've come from a safe country, you may go back to that safe country immediately. If you run across the road, like they're doing at Roxham Road, which has become basically a new express entry port for people into this country, you are afforded the full rights of the United Nations Convention on Refugees. You go into the system where you have access to the Canadian, all of the Canadian social systems. You have access to the Canadian court system. You can appeal your deportation order for 10 or 12 years. And so people are doing this by the tens of thousands because they know that there's a crackdown on immigration in the United States. So the failure to address that has created problems that have manifested themselves in the food banks in major cities, in the shelters in major cities, This is not how the system is designed to work. Chilliwack showed its compassion. It showed how it wants to help people of the world during the Syrian refugee crisis. There were dozens and dozens of groups that came together and put up their own money to help people get away from a war zone and get their feet underneath them. And I think that is the sort of thing that we should support. We should not support illegal crossings that are there just for convenience. And I think on the numbers of immigration, the number that we have, I think we have to set that based on the needs of Canada. We can't arbitrarily set targets that are high, and we can't arbitrarily set targets that are low. We should set the targets based on the needs of Canadians, primarily on the needs of our economy. Who do we need? What do we need them for? When do we need them? That's the sort of system that we need to have. And right now, quite frankly, whenever we try to bring up our concerns with this, once again, we have a government in Ottawa that just says, you are a racist. You say, no, we want to help people. Bringing people here and having them go into a shelter or having them go to the food bank is not compassionate. It's not orderly, and it's not fair, and we need to change it.
Yeah, I actually think I agree a lot with what Mark just said. I'm very proud of how we've done immigration in the past, but that doesn't mean that's how we've been doing immigration in the present. We've seen a major shift in that we're pushing the number higher and higher, and that's actually driving up the problem of housing in our big cities, especially Vancouver and Toronto, where 40% of the immigrants are choosing to go, and that's driving up housing issues here in Chilliwack because we're the hinterland of Vancouver, and so the pressure goes out. And we need to bring that under control. We've got a bureaucracy right now that is basically dropping the newcomers and not being able to help them. And I've seen that with close friends of mine who have immigrated over, and they ran into trouble where they couldn't get citizenship for quite some time because they were having a hard time getting the immigration services to recognize that they spoke English, which is one of the two conditions. Speak English, speak French is one of the parts of the point system. He was a high school graduate from New Zealand. New Zealand has one language, it's English. It shouldn't have been that hard to demonstrate. You should have been able to just go into the office and speak and tell them, hey, look, I can converse in English just fine. And yet they create these arbitrary barriers of bureaucracy. The PPC wants to reduce the numbers to around where we had it in the 1990s, before we started seeing this upward pressure that started to create problems. That's what Mark mentioned. Right now, 40% of the shelter space in Toronto is occupied by newcomers. We've seen in the last 2 years a doubling of newcomers who become homeless. This is our system failing. And we want to make sure that if you're a newcomer to this country and we invited you in, that you are treated like an honored guest, you are shown full hospitality, and we help you to become citizens so you can then join with us in inviting the next ones to come. But if you are sneaking across the border, right, if you're basically crossing illegally, and I know that the Liberals like to use the word irregular, but if you are crossing the border illegally, then we should be showing you the door as fast as we can, because that's not our system. And so I guess I do support a two-tiered system. One tier based on who's been invited, and the other one is who's invading, right? And I just don't think we should be helping individuals come into this country illegally, especially when they wind up in the same queue as everybody else and wind up bumping people who are trying to do this the right way.
Well, as a fourth-generation Canadian, I think that probably everyone in this room is an immigrant of one sort or another. I think that's our real strength is our diversity in this country, is the fact that most of the people that do come to Canada end up, being gainfully employed, or they start their own business and they hire other people, other Canadians. I think being too restrictive on immigration is probably not healthy for our country. I mean, we're the second largest landmass in the world, and we have one of the smallest populations. We have all sorts of resources and that we can't. We don't have enough people to maximize the benefit for. Of course, I don't believe that we should be letting terrorists in across the border, but most of these people that are coming across at these irregular border crossings are people that are from, are refugees. They're people that whose lives have been threatened. So we are offering them a safe place to come and live. And I think that's very Canadian. I think that's, you know, I would expect if for some reason our friend down south, Mr. Donald Trump, decided to invade Canada or whatever, you know, that one day we may need to find a safe place to go. Of course, you know, there's got to be restrictions on whatever we do, but for the main part, I think, you know, it's, you know, we need 350,000 people a year extra to move into Canada. They're not threatening our jobs or our families. There's, you know, there's a lot of rhetoric about, you know, some of the bad things that they might do, or, you know, they're creating all this competition or whatever, but in reality, I think they're a real benefit to our country, and, you know, it needs to be critiqued a little bit, but I don't see a real danger issue.
Thanks, So I have time for a couple more questions, if someone over there.
Hi, my name is Casey Smith. Question of economics. The current government's in the last 3 years at least has had deficits between $10 and $20 billion, and I don't know if that's sustainable or not. And I'd like to hear your opinion on whether that is sustainable, and if it isn't, what would you do about it?
Let's start with that.
So the real economic benefit in this country will be when we transfer to clean and renewable energy systems. This will create the greatest economic catalyst that the world will ever see. I mean, just buttoning up our buildings, we could save 30% of our energy and create so much economy that it would make your head spin. Could you imagine just in Chilliwack alone, if we tightened up all our buildings, that the work that would create in trades and labor and what have you. Another point is that, you know, we've been running deficits for 152 years now. And the Conservative governments are responsible for 75% of all the debt ever created in this country. So I still believe in that, you know, if we start to do things right, that will create an economy that will create a much stronger economy, and we'll be able to reduce these deficits. The one thing that we never talk about when we talk about GDP and economics is quality of life. Like, what's a good quality of life worth? You know, we're always talking about dollars and cents, and we're not talking about like clean air and clean water and protecting the biosphere. Like, how long could we live without clean air? Maybe a few minutes. How long could we live without clean water? Maybe a few days. And how long could we live without soil that we could grow our crops in and produce food? So, you know, there's a lot to be said about economic growth in this country, but to just run up deficits and not take into consideration what the real values of Canada should be. I mean, we want to export triple the amount of diluted bitumen to Asian markets that don't even exist for like $20 a cubic meter. I mean, these are lost leaders. We're just going to go further and further into the hole. We could be transforming to clean energy, building windmills and power plants with clean energy, and we'd be creating all kinds of economic growth and activity that would really stimulate the base of this country, and we could actually get rid of some of these debts. But as we keep meandering along on the same path that we're going now, it won't be long until we're $1 trillion in debt. So there's a lot to be said about doing things right instead of just following the old economic paths of standby governments that have been making the same mistakes for the last 152 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is $10 to $20 billion deficit sustainable? And the answer to that at the federal level is, yeah, it's sustainable because, and I'll tell you why, It's based on a debt to GDP ratio. And so the debt to GDP ratio is the total amount that we produce in a country divided by the total amount of the debt, basically. So we take the debt, we divide it by how much we're producing, and that tells us a percentage. We're been under 40% since Harper. In fact, Harper didn't add anything to the debt to GDP while he was in. Paul Martin managed to get it down significantly, but he did it on the backs of the provinces. And this is the part that people don't understand. It's not a question of what's going on so much at the federal level. I mean, 10, 20 billion, if we're growing the economy, it comes out basically even. But the provinces, they're hurting, municipalities are hurting, and households are hurting most of all. The households right now, it's 182% what individuals earn is what they owe. In the course of a year, they owe 182% more than what they're earning. Now, if we compare our federal and our provincial debts together against the United States federal and state debts, they're fairly close. Then when you add in how much we owe as households, we're in the same trouble that they are, and their system is crumbling. I mean, federally, they're adding like more to their debt than we have as a debt every single year. Their deficit exceeds our debt. One of the things that Art just said was that we will be approaching $1 trillion eventually. When you add in the provincial debts, we passed that a long time ago. Right? We're at $1.5 trillion, and when you add in the household debt, that's got to add another $3.4 trillion. So we are swimming in debt right now. Is it sustainable at the federal level, a $10 to $20 billion deficit? It's sustainable, but it's also immoral, and that's the bigger issue. We are spending money that is not ours to spend. We are borrowing it from our kids, and our kids are facing an awful lot of challenges. They're going to have to try and figure out how they're going to pay for our pensions as we have a declining workforce. They're going to have to figure out how to handle whatever challenges the future is going to hold, and nobody knows what those are. They have the housing problems, trying to raise families in this economy when housing costs are going up and up and up. I tell my students that this is the fiscal crunch. They're going to be hit from 3 levels, and one of those levels is our debt. Both federal, provincial, and household, this is the problem. And so it's easy to say, oh, the federal government, we've got it under control. Well, Paul Martin brought it under control on the backs of the provinces and the households, and we've been reeling ever since.
I think there's a couple of issues here. One is that Justin Trudeau promised in the last federal election 4 years ago that the budget would be balanced in 2019. He said, I'm looking Canadians in the eye and I'm being honest with them as I always am. The budget will be balanced in 2019. After his first budget, when he was asked, how set in stone is your promise to balance the budget? He said, it is very set in stone. Now he can't even bring himself to say the words. We've asked him hundreds of times in the House, when will the budget be balanced? He just ignores it. He pretends that he didn't make the promise. He pretends that he didn't lie to Canadians, which is exactly what he did. And I think so that's number one. The broken promise is something that Canadians shouldn't forget. The other part that Canadians should recognize is that this government has spent not just the $20 billion deficit. They had an unexpected $20 billion in additional revenue that came in because of the strong world economy. And they spent that and $20 billion. If they had just done almost nothing, just continued with the pace of growth that was underway, we would have balanced the budget already. But instead, they've purposely gone out of their way to spend money during the good times. They've spent the rainy day fund during sunny days. And I think that is, as Rob has said, that is what is unforgivable, is that it is just designed entirely for Justin Trudeau's benefit at this time. That in August alone, they promised $15 billion in new government spending in the lead up to this election. Their platform that they just released includes $100 billion in additional spending over and above their deficits. Canadians know that borrowed money needs to be paid back. They know that it's not free. It isn't fun coupons. This is money that will have to be paid back, not by Justin Trudeau, not by my generation, but by my 15-year-old son, by his kids. This is intergenerational theft, is what this is. It is spending on what we want now and our electoral benefit now and sending the bill to our kids. None of us do that. in the way that we live. We give an inheritance to our kids if we're lucky enough to. We say, we've worked our whole lives, here is the benefit to you, not the other way around. How will you work your whole life so I can live high on the hog right now? So it does matter. We have a plan to get back to balance within 5 years because borrowed money has to be paid back. And when you have deficits, there's only 2 ways to get back under control. One is to have a massive cut in services, and the other is to have a massive tax hike. And that's what Justin Trudeau has set the table for in the future. We have to stop it now so we can get it under control and restore fiscal sanity to Ottawa.
Thanks, Ron. Well, having 4 boys who I've supported through university, I'm quite happy to hear that they're going to be paying for my Canada pension fund. Anyway, so it's 20 past now. I'm going to give each of the candidates an opportunity, 2 minutes please, if you will, Mr. Close. Let's start with Rob. Sorry, not Rob, Art.
Well, thanks everyone for coming out today. You have some great candidates to choose from. That is the good news. Now here's the bad news. We humans are creating the 3rd great extinction. If we don't change our ways, all critically endangered species will be lost, and it will take the Earth more than 3 million years to recover. Many animals will go extinct in the next 50 years, destroying billions of years of evolution that happened before us. Big mammals such as rhinos and elephants are under severe threat, and the planet suffers more when distinct animals die off. Asian elephants have only a 33% chance of survival even under current conditions. Animals do have their own defense against threats of evolution, but they can't evolve as fast as we're destroying their habitats. A great number of wild animals have already gone extinct, and even if we stop poaching, polluting, and clearing their wild habitats, their chances of survival is extremely minimal if we continue our current practices. These extinctions are not just limited to animals. They also include your children, your grandchildren, and future generations as well. Though we do have the power to reverse this madness, it won't be easy, but it is possible. The Greens' Mission Possible is a 20-point roadmap to our survival. It will take a concerted effort from all of us, but it can be done. I ask you, do we have a choice? Let's stop this insanity. On October 21st, vote Green. Thank you. Merci. Haricot.
Well, I want to thank Arthur. I think that Arthur and me are similar in that we are both trying to kill our Goliaths. I do think we disagree on what we identify Goliath as being. Arthur obviously cares an awful lot about the environment, and so do I. I am not an individual who tends to see climate change as being an imminent threat to our civilization. I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I've been studying it for 28 years. I was on the one side of the fence. I looked at the data, and too much of the data, like take a look at a tide gauge, data that we have mapping out what's been going on in Vancouver, Victoria, Stockholm, Sweden. It doesn't matter. There's no sea level rise, and yet there's at least no increase or acceleration, and the rates are incredibly low. Vancouver is 0.37 millimeters a year. 0.37 millimeters. So after 100 years of that steady rate, and it's been steady for 60 years, we would see 3.7 centimeters of sea level rise. And we're told by alarmists that this is a huge threat to our planet, sea level rise. It's going to bury, New York City, it's going to bury all of our cities. No, it doesn't make any sense, all right? At least if they're saying that we should be seeing it now, and they've been saying that, we should be having it happen now, it ain't happening now. Take a look at the tide gauge data, it's not happening. So I see that they have been drumming up a lot of fear. But I agree there are a lot of problems. There's, issues connected, for instance, with plastics getting in the ocean. We have to look at that. I'm in favor of planting trees, clean air, clean water. We support that. I care about other things like freedom of expression, care about making sure we have a sound fiscal policy, care about whether or not we can provide more for our children and our grandchildren than we are taking. I want these things to be fundamental to how we advance. And so we all have our Goliaths, that's what gets us into politics. But each of us is going to throw our stone, and hopefully what we say will resonate with you.
All elections are about choices, and Canadians have an important choice to make on October 21st. They can choose a new Conservative government that will live within its means and leave more money in their pockets, conduct itself in a manner that brings pride, not embarrassment, to Canadians, will follow and uphold ethics laws and put the needs of Canadians first, or they can choose to reward Justin Trudeau for his broken promises, ethical scandals, and out-of-control spending. More and more Canadians are barely getting by, let alone getting ahead. A report from BDO Canada released just this week shows that more than half of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck with no disposable income, and more than a third have no retirement savings. Household debt is rising on an unsustainable path, and the Liberal government has made it worse. Not only did Justin Trudeau break his solemn promise to Canadians that he would balance the budget this year, he's now promising to break the bank to try to buy votes in this election. His recently released platform includes nearly $100 billion in new spending on top of his current $20 billion a year deficit, money that will have to be paid back in the form of higher taxes or program cuts in the future. Trudeau's deficits represent a huge bill that our children and grandchildren will have to pay back so that he can go on a self-serving spending spree today. He made promises in the last campaign that he broke without even breaking a sweat. So how can we believe what he says now? It's time for a Conservative government that will uphold the rule of law for everyone, not cut special deals for the likes of SNC-Lavalin while throwing principled leaders like Jody Wilson-Raybould under the bus. It's time for a new government in Ottawa, a government that will live within its means, lower your taxes, and put more money in your pocket. On October 21st, I'm asking you to vote Conservative because it's time for you to get ahead.
Well, that wraps it up, and I'd like for all of you to join me in thanking these good people for coming forward and talking to us. Thank you very much.